So today we are wrapping up our holiday mini-via that we call Oxney. We have been celebrating the season of Advent, Hanukkah, Solstice, Christmas, New Year's, and Epiphany. And our theme for this via has been ordinary miracles. We've been talking about ways that we can encounter miracles in the mundane and ordinary times of our lives. So according to the Christian calendar, January 6th of every year is a celebration called Epiphany. It marks the announcement of the birth of Jesus to the Magi, or the wise men, which was the first time that Christ was made manifest to the Gentiles. It also commemorates the recognition of Jesus' divinity during his baptism and his first miracle at Cana, where he turned water into wine. Now, the word Epiphany, it comes from this combination of Greek and Old French and Latin, and it literally means to reveal. We often call flashes of insight that we have an epiphany, where suddenly we know something that the moment before we didn't know. Do you know where that came from? It's an epiphany. It's a manifestation. So Christ's epiphany into the world was a revelation that we all carry the spark of divinity within us. From our birth, just like Jesus, we have been granted an intimate connection with the divine. In these human suits we walk around in, we often forget that we are divinely connected to the holy. So epiphanies remind us that there's something more going on here than just our little egos running around setting fires and disturbing the world's peace. So Epiphany is a time, like every single day, is a time to remember our unity, to remember who we truly are. We are God's beloved children. We remain united with one together in the mind of God, even if we appear out here in this world to be divided and separate and in disarray. So what if, jubilants, the Epiphany is so powerful that it could serve as our guiding light in this world, taking us to the places that the holy would have us be so we can learn to embody the light of love in this world? What if this year we all dedicated ourselves to a year of Epiphany living, which means we ask Spirit to guide every step in every moment of our lives instead of relying on the ego's schemes and plans. So if you're up for it, I'm willing to bet if you dedicate yourself to Epiphany living this year, the two words you'll say a lot this year will be, oh, yeah. If you're at all like me, and I know some of you are, whether you want to admit it or not, you've made New Year's resolutions that have lasted, maybe a few weeks into the new year, maybe a month or so at best, right? Come on.
30 seconds.
I'm not 30 seconds. I'm not saying.
Mine ended this
I
morning.
am not alone. Yours ended this morning? Okay. So my resolutions, they've always been fairly predictable. Lose a little weight, find a little more money, get organized, learn a new skill, or at least keep up with the ones I have, right? This year, though, I'm making a different resolution. Sure, I'd like to lose a little weight. I'd like to fatten the bank account. I'd like to be able to find stuff when I need it. I'd like to play guitar better or just at least keep up the current level of skill. But it occurs to me, though, all of those resolutions, they're seeking to change things outside of myself. All right, weight is on the inside, but it does depend a lot on what I put into it from the outside, right? So this year, I'm going to take a hint from author Martha Beck and resolve to make changes from the inside out. Beck says that her one resolution this year is to work on her amygdala. That's a great resolution. Yeah. This is an ancient, your amygdala is a very ancient, tiny piece of your brain, and that is where your fight or flight reaction lives. It's not verbal, but it reacts to sights and senses and sounds that trigger us. So whenever she gets triggered, Beck says that she takes a non-judgmental observer stance for her feelings. So she dispassionately describes whatever is happening, such as, I feel a rush of heat on my neck. My heart is beating faster. I feel a pain in my chest. And she continues watching and describing that anxiety until things start to change. The fear, she says, will begin to soften. The tightness in your chest releases. Your heart slows down. And then she says, You have a little conversation with your amygdala. You point out to it that things changed. You're not stuck in that story of fear. It's not your reality. It's simply a trigger, and you're using it to just create more fear and more anxiety. I've been using Beck's method on my own anxiety, and it is a handy trick when I get stuck in that cycle of worry and fear and despair. It works. I've done it. I've slowed my own heartbeat. I have been breathing more deeply, and I say to my amygdala, look, there is not a bear in the room. You're okay. There's nothing here to be afraid of. Stop making stuff up. So Beck's method, it reminds me a little bit of what A Course in Miracles counsels us to do every morning. To remember that our plans in this world don't work because they're based on the ego's fear. The ego's motto of seek but do not find. We're afraid, though, that we're not going to find our purpose in life. We're not going to advance in our job. We're not going to find the right mate or achieve the success that we have been searching for. We keep following the ego's plan. Seek, but do not find. Oh, and yeah, we have some success and joy in this life, but whatever we do, whatever level of success or happiness we achieve, it's never enough for the ego. There's always the next plan, the next dream, the next get-rich-quick scheme to follow that ends up in the same place, leaving us just still wanting more over and over again. The ego convinces us that if something outside of ourselves would just change or go away, we would finally be happy. And all of that, all those plans that the ego comes up with, they sound really fabulous. But they never pan out as planned. The only way to break the cycle of the ego's relentless need for more is to do what Beck suggests. Become the observer of your own life. So when the ego gets disgruntled, when it gets restless, instead of jumping on its latest idea to make you more popular or more money or lose weight or whatever, bring you fame and fortune, instead sit with the idea like it's a child who's telling you their grand plans. Be the observer. Hear them out. But don't immediately satisfy its desires, because the ego will take you on a million wild goose chases. That's its purpose. Or it convinces us to force ourselves into a new job or situation or relationship because it has a lot of attractive reasons on why it might be good for us in some way, but it's going to end up, I'm telling you, you're going to end up in the same not enough hangover a few weeks or months or even decades later. Jubilants, there's a better way. There's a better way to live. It involves becoming that observer, watching your ego spin and dream and connive all of its plan, and then gently turning all of it over to Spirit. Because when you do that, Spirit will make it clear what you need to do in every moment of your life if you're willing to just ditch the ego's planning and scheming, and live that life of epiphany. That life that trusts every moment to manifest whatever it is you need to be doing, saying, or being. A Course says we can live this way by every day asking Spirit 3 simple questions. And during the day, when we feel the amygdala being triggered, we go back to these 3 questions. What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Jubilants, this is my resolution this year, to ask these 3 questions every single day and just see what happens. I'm not making any plans other than, the work I got to do or whatever. But I'm not making any grand plans. I just want to ask these 3 questions. What should I do? Who should I talk to? What should I say? So instead of asking the ego those questions, I'll ask my higher divine self. This is what it means to live in the moment, Jubilants, to place ourselves so fully within the flow of life that we trust Spirit, to put us in the places we're needed, to speak the words of love that are required, and be the presence of love to the people who need to feel God's love through us. And this is the first time in a long time that I have been jazzed about the prospect of a New Year's resolution. So I invite you to consider playing along with me this year, to keep these questions in the forefront of your mind. What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say and to whom? And simply be open to where the Spirit may lead you throughout the day. Breathe deep. I admit that my resolution this year is inspired by author and teacher Michael Singer, who wrote a book called The Surrender Experiment. And he writes that he wondered what life would be like if he just dropped his feelings of resistance and went wherever the flow of life happened to take him. His challenge to himself was simple. He writes, if life brought events in front of me, I would treat them as if they came to take me beyond myself. If my personal self complained, so beyond myself, beyond the ego, and so if his personal self, if his ego complained, he said I would use each opportunity to simply let him go and surrender to what life was presenting me. Now, life for Michael Singer has been really incredible. In his younger years, he fell in love with meditation and solitude so much that he bought this little plot of land in Gainesville, Florida, to build himself a cabin so he could isolate and be alone and meditate all the time. Eventually, a community began to gather around him, and he initially resisted this. But now, that little plot of land has become a sprawling spiritual center known as the Temple of the Universe. And Singer himself gained his fortune by writing medical software and starting a company that was eventually bought by WebMD. His life also brought him trials in the form of a RICO investigation into embezzlement at his company, but he also accepted whatever fate might bring, and he used his time away from his company to write his first New York Times bestseller called The Untethered Soul. Now, Jubilants, when I first read Singer's books many years ago, I marveled, how can such a life be possible? I mean, how magical is all of that? Even when he's sitting there with the prospect of going to jail for a long, long time, he's writing a book. What would we be doing? I'd be sitting there going, dear God, don't let, oh my God, I would just be a ball of anxiety. But no, he's like, oh, well, if I go to jail, that's what life brings me. And then whatever I'll do in jail, I'll do in jail. He was okay with it. He surrendered even to the idea of maybe spending many years in jail. But you know what? I get it now. I had an epiphany about Michael Singer in the last few months. I realized that I had left my ego in charge of the area of life that many people often call your vocation. And the ego had all these schemes, all these ideas, and it had me convinced that I wasn't going to just make money. These things will help you make money, but they'll also help you build a following. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing out here in the social media world? We're going to build a following. Thousands of people will watch your TikTok or your Instagram or on your web page or whatever. Oh, web pages are passé these days, by the way. It's all Instagram and TikTok and blah, 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 blah. Anyway. So I took online marketing classes. I read spiritually based business books. I listened to tons, and I am talking about tons of authors and podcasters teach me how to build a sales funnel and get people into my classes and workshops. Ask me how that worked out. How'd that work out? Yeah, I was exhausted. Welcome to my following. It's good to have you all here.
19 people and 2 dogs.
It's great. 19 people and 2 dogs. Beautiful. I love it. Ooh, sorry. I love it so much. My ego pounced on me, though. It told me, woo, you are a terrible business person. You're a terrible leader. You ought to just give up, my ego said. And you know what? That's the first honest thing my ego ever told me. And so I took its advice. I gave up. But I didn't give up my vocation as a teacher of God. What I gave up was the ego's plan for salvation. I stopped following its commands to enroll in the next class and find the next right business model and build my following. This year, I'm going to begin my own surrender experiment. I'm not striving for the ego's goals. I'm not following its plan to get rich and famous and popular and powerful. Instead, I'm going to strive for the Spirit's goals, to become more loving, to become more compassionate, to become more generous, less anxious, less fearful, less selfish. This year, I'm going to go back to the beginning, to that place where light was created, back to my Creator. What comes to life through our Creator jubilance is light, and that is all there is. And we are all that light. And when we remember this, then the ego's cries for us to seek anything outside of ourselves that we think is going to make us happy, successful. It just seems ridiculous. There's nothing outside that's going to bring you lasting peace or joy or happiness. Why are we searching anywhere outside of ourselves for what we think we need to do in our lives? We have the light inside. We have the inner Christ star within us that, just like those magi of old, it just beckons us to recognize it, to see it, and then follow it. Because when we do, we find everything we ever need, everything we ever need to do, everything we ever need to be. When we follow the light, when we follow our intention, our higher knowing, then the darkness can never overcome it. And I'm not saying don't make any plans, don't have any desires in this world. What I'm saying is this: hold all of those desires very lightly. Observe them, become the observer, and examine their true source. Because the ego likes to dress itself up as our spiritual side and whisper its longings into our ears. Guide us, lead us astray. It told me, for example, I need to get my teachings out there, build a following, and most definitely charge a fee. But we can see through this deception by its ultimate goals, which are always the enrichment of itself in some form or fashion, whether it's manipulating the world to avoid causing us pain or manipulating it for our own financial gain or admiration. Our spiritual desires, though, they have no hint of manipulation, no hint of personal gain. We're just seeking to live in that higher divine state because our desire is not for worldly gain, but our desire is for what we already have, jubilance. We already have God's ultimate and abiding peace and joy and love. And in this state, there are no anxieties, because once we decide to surrender, all of life becomes a joy. Even the things our ego tells us are chores become transformed. And I'll give you an example. Beth and I own 2 Airbnbs between us, and I used to grumble about being a high-paid maid. Now, though, when a house needs cleaning, my perspective has shifted, which is a miracle. A shift in perspective is a miracle. And now I approach cleaning a house as an honor instead of a chore, because I am preparing a place for other people to come and enjoy a vacation or a home away from home. I don't have to clean a house. I get to prepare a place. And there's joy in that, even while scrubbing a toilet. I'm not coming to your house, Keith. You've got to do your own toilets. Too much joy. That's right. There's only so much joy I can handle, Keith. So many more things have changed in my perspective since I have hit upon this new way of being in the world, and I could be all here all day recounting them to you. Like yesterday when I was helping Beth mend the fence over at her Airbnb, where I'm like, this day is gonna suck. But I went over there, and she's still working on it today, but we got most of it done, and it was not as bad as we thought it was gonna be. So when you get over the resistance, when you change your perspective, it's a miracle how much joy you can get, even in things that you thought were going to suck. So what I really want you to do this morning is to invite you to join me in this year of Epiphany living. I'm following Singer's lead here, and I'm just going to wonder, what would happen to me if I just inwardly surrender my resistance and let the flow of life be in charge? To get me in that flow, I'm going to follow Beck's idea of becoming the observer of my fear and anxiety. And to get me ready to do whatever the Spirit calls for me to do in any given moment, I am using the 3 questions from a course to surrender my will every moment. What would you, Holy Spirit, have me do? What would you, Holy Spirit, where would you have me go? What would you, Holy Spirit, have me say, and to whom? And I am so excited, Jubilants, to see how Spirit might use me, move me, change me during this surrender experiment in my year of Epiphany living. And if it sounds exciting to you, then stay tuned. This is not the only Sunday I'm going to be talking about this. I'm going to be using this as a starting point for my messages in the new year so you can come along on this journey. And I may stumble here and there. I may be tempted to go back to the ego's dreams and schemes, but I will tell you that once you get a true taste of surrender, the ego's manipulations get easier and easier to spot. So I invite you, jubilants, in this new year, become the observer of your fears. See it for the manipulator that it is and resolve this year to change from the inside out, however that seems possible to you. And I know that when you're willing to live in the moment and become aware of how Spirit is moving in your life, and then that head knowledge migrates downward to become our heart's knowing, and then when all that happens, we become this embodiment of the first light of love's creation throughout the world. And when all that happens, the only thing you will know to say is, oh, yeah.